They say that in the suburbs, the grass is always greener because it's fed by what we bury underneath it. We've all seen that one house, the one that sits at the end of the cul-de-sac, bathed in the soft glow of golden hour sunlight. The paint never peels. The hedges are trimmed to the millimeter. The cars in the driveway are always washed. In my town, Oakhaven, that was the Aldridge estate. And the people inside? They weren't just residents. They were icons. My father, Robert Aldridge Jr., was the kind of man who carried the weight of the town on his shoulders without ever creasing his suit. A senior partner at the most prestigious law firm in the state. A man whose word was gospel in the courtroom and law at the dinner table. My mother, Diane, was the heart of Oakhaven, a teacher who didn't just educate children, she molded them into proper citizens. We were the family featured in the Gazette's Community Pillars series. We were the family strangers pointed to when they wanted to show their children what success looked like. But here is the thing about icons. They are made of stone. They are cold. They are unmoving. And most importantly, they are hollow. I grew up in the gilded cage. That's what I call it now. Back then, I just called it home. We lived by a code that was never spoken, but always understood. Image is reality. If you look happy, you are happy. If the house is clean, the soul is clean. If the secret is never told, the secret doesn't exist. For 60 years, the Aldridge legacy was built on this foundation. We were a monument to mid-century American perfection. We were the survivors of the messy, chaotic world outside our gates. But monuments have a funny way of crumbling from the inside out. It started with a death. Not a violent one, at least not in the way you'd expect for this niche. My grandmother, Eleanor, the matriarch of the Aldridge clan, passed away in her sleep. Her funeral was a state event for Oakhaven. Hundreds of people lined the pews, weeping for the woman who taught them how to arrange lilies and how to maintain poise in the face of tragedy. They spoke about her legendary marriage to my grandfather, a union that lasted 40 years until his passing. They spoke about her grace, her silence, her perfect devotion. But as I stood at that casket, looking at the mask of a woman I realized I never truly knew, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a crime scene. But the crime hadn't been committed yet. Or maybe it had been committed 60 years ago, and we were all just living in the aftermath. True crime usually starts with a body, a motive, a smoking gun. But the mystery I'm about to show you started with a false bottom in a steamer trunk. A week after the funeral, while the rest of Oakhaven was still singing Eleanor's praises, I was tasked with the unpleasantries, sorting through the attic. It was a graveyard of perfect memories. Boxes of old school reports with nothing but A's, pressed flowers from galas, trophies for debates won and races run. It was suffocating. Then I moved the trunk. It was heavy, heavier than it should have been. It was a vintage piece, lined with brass and wrapped in worn leather. When I emptied it, something felt wrong. The depth of the interior didn't match the height of the exterior. It was a classic piece of shady architecture, a hidden compartment. My heart began to race. In our family, you didn't look for hidden things. You ignored the cracks in the wall. You painted over the mold. But I couldn't help myself. I found the latch, a tiny, recessed pin hidden beneath the floral lining. When I pressed it, the bottom clicked. There it was, the Burgundy Diary. It wasn't just a book. As I held it, I realized I was holding the detonator to a bomb that had been ticking since 1965. Taped to the cover was a note. The ink faded, but the handwriting unmistakable. It was Grandma Eleanor's elegant, cursive script, the same hand that wrote 1,000 thank you notes and recipe cards. But the words were different. They weren't proper. They were a warning. See for eyes that seek truth, not perfection. If you are reading this, the cage is finally open. Do not forgive me. Just understand why I had to kill the woman I was to become the woman you needed. In the true crime world, we talk about shattered families. We talk about the moment the illusion breaks and the neighbors say, "We never saw it coming," Well, I'm the one who broke the lock. I'm the one who read the entries about Clara and the 1965 protocol. I'm the one who took this evidence to my mother and watched the perfect Aldridge mask melt off her face in real time. Today, we are going to do a forensic deep dive into the Aldridge legacy. We are going to examine the evidence found in this diary. We are going to look at the victim, a woman named Eleanor, who was forced to disappear, and the perpetrators, the society, the family, Wiz and the man who kept her in a gilded cage. Because sometimes the greatest crime isn't murder. Sometimes the crime is the life you were forced to lead instead of the one you were born for. Get comfortable. This isn't the story my family wants me to tell. This is the story they spent 60 years trying to kill. This is the architecture of a lie. Every investigation has a point of no return. It's that moment where the detective finds the one piece of evidence that makes it impossible to ever see the case the same way again. For me, that moment happened in the passenger seat of my car, parked outside a locksmith shop on a Tuesday afternoon. I had spent 3 days staring at that burgundy book. I kept it on my nightstand, and in the middle of the night, the brass lock seemed to catch the moonlight, mocking me. I felt like a voyeur, a grave robber, but that note on the cover, "For eyes that seek truth," it was a directive. It was a dying woman's last will and testament, not for her property, but for her soul. I took it to a man named Mr. Higgins. He's been the town's locksmith since the 70s. His shop is a cramped, metallic-smelling hole in the wall that feels like a time capsule. I told him it was a family heirloom and I'd lost the key. He didn't ask questions, that's the Oak Haven way, but he looked at the lock with a strange sort of reverence. "This isn't a standard diary lock, kid," he'd said, squinting through a jeweler's loop. "This is industrial grade. Whoever put this on wanted to make sure that if this book was found, it would take effort to see what was inside. Most people use diaries to vent. This was built to be a vault." When the lock finally clicked open, it didn't sound like a victory. It sounded like a bone snapping. I started reading at 2 p.m. I didn't stop until the sun went down. The diary began in January 1965. To the outside world, 1965 was a year of progress and the Great Society. For my grandfather, Robert Sr., it was the year he was tapped for the bench, the beginning of a judicial dynasty. For my grandmother, Eleanor, it was supposed to be the year of the perfect hostess. The early entries are a masterclass in psychological masking. She lists menus for dinner parties. She notes the exact shade of lipstick Robert preferred. She records the growth of her children with the clinical detachment of a scientist observing a specimen. But beneath the proper Aldridge exterior, a different narrative was forming. A shadow Eleanor was screaming for air. Then I hit the June entries. This is where the evidence turns from domestic record-keeping to a secret history. June 12, 1965. Met Clara today at the Sterling Gallery. She was wearing a smock stained with cerulean blue. When she looked at me, I felt a physical strike to the chest. Not pain. A sudden, violent awareness that I have been sleeping for 30 years. Who was Clara? In the official Aldridge history, the name doesn't exist. There are no photos of her in the albums, no mention of her in the letters Robert saved. But in this diary, Clara is the sun around which Eleanor's secret world orbited. As I turned the pages, I realized I was reading a logbook of clandestine operations. Eleanor wasn't just going to the market or volunteering at the library. She was meeting Clara in the back booths of roadside diners 20 miles outside of town. They were taking long, aimless drives to the coast. They were creating a life in the in-between. July 15th, 1965. We sat by the Hudson for 4 hours. Clara told me that my life isn't a life. It's a script written by men who are afraid of the dark. She held my hand. And for the first time, I didn't look over my shoulder to see who was watching. For 4 hours, the perfect Mrs. Aldridge was dead, and I have never felt more resurrected. This is where the conflict of the story becomes a visceral, localized trauma. I looked at the family photos from that summer. There's one of them at the Oak Haven Country Club. Robert is beaming, his arm draped over Eleanor's shoulder, like a hunter with a prize. Eleanor is smiling that frozen, perfect smile. Her pearls are straight. Her hair is a helmet of blonde perfection. Looking at that photo now, with the diary in my lap, it felt like looking at a hostage video. Every entry in August of 1965 reads like a countdown. Eleanor and Clara were planning something. They weren't just having an affair. They were planning an escape. They had a fund, whilst Eleanor was skimming grocery money and household expenses, cent by cent, hiding it in a jar buried in the garden. They were going to New York City, then Paris. Clara had a contact there. They were going to live as artists, as humans. But then, the tone of the diary shifts. The ink becomes blotchy, the handwriting frantic. The security of their secret world was breached. September 3rd, 1965. Robert found the jar. He didn't yell. He didn't strike me. He just sat at the kitchen table with the money spread out like a poker hand. He said, "Eleanor, we have a reputation to maintain. Think of the children. Think of the shame. You aren't going anywhere. You are going to be the woman this family deserves. Or you will be a woman with nothing. Clara is gone." He settled it with her, so I'm not allowed to ask how. This was the crime. Not a murder in the physical sense, but a total, systemic erasure of a human being's identity. My grandfather didn't kill Eleanor. He just made sure the real Eleanor never saw the light of day again. He replaced her with a puppet. And the most chilling part? The town applauded him for it. They celebrated their stable, perfect marriage for another 4 decades. As I sat in that attic, I realized that my entire family tree was grown from the soil of this ultimatum. My mother's childhood, my own upbringing, it was all funded by the settlement of Eleanor's soul. We were living in a house built on a grave, but the discovery didn't end with the diary, because as I reached the final pages, I found a list of names. Names of people in this town who are still alive. People who helped Robert settle the situation. The investigation was no longer about the past. It was about the present. I had the evidence. I had the motive. Now I needed to see the accomplice. I closed the diary, tucked it into my jacket, and drove to my mother's house. It was time to find out how much of the perfect image she was willing to die for. They say you can never go home again, but they don't tell you why. It's not because the house changes, it's because you do. When you've spent your whole life looking at a masterpiece, you don't notice the cracks until you're holding the hammer. I sat in my driveway for 20 minutes, the burgundy diary sitting on the passenger seat like a live grenade. My mother, Diane, was inside. She was likely doing exactly what an Aldridge woman was trained to do at 7 p.m., sipping a decaf Earl Grey, perhaps marking a stack of student essays or organizing the silver for the upcoming seasonal brunch. She was the reigning queen of the Oak Haven social circuit, the woman who had inherited Eleanor's mantle of grace and wore it like a suit of armor. But I knew something she didn't know I knew. I had the black box from the crash of 1965, and I was about to play the recording. The house smelled like lemon oil and lavender, the scent of everything is fine. My mother looked up from her desk, her reading glasses perched on the bridge of her nose. She gave me that practiced maternal smile, the one that says, "I love you, but also don't make a mess." "Maya, dear, you look disheveled. Is everything all right?" I didn't answer. I walked to the kitchen island, the marble cold and white like an altar, and I placed the burgundy diary in the center of it. I watched her eyes. For a split second, the mask slipped. Just a flicker. A micro-expression of pure, unadulterated terror that would have been invisible to anyone who wasn't looking for it. Her hand, which had been reaching for her tea, paused midair. She knew that book. She knew the leather. She knew the lock. "Where did you get that?" Her voice was lower now. The Teacher of the Year lilt was gone. "Grandma's trunk," I said, "beneath the false floor." The one she hid from Robert. The one she hid from you. You shouldn't have opened it, she whispered. Some things are buried for a reason, Maya. To protect the living. To protect the name. Protect the name? I felt the anger, cold and sharp, rising in my throat. Is that what we're calling it? I read about September 1965, Mom. I read about the settlement. I read about Clara. I read about how Grandpa Robert dismantled a woman's life because she dared to love someone who wasn't a proper accessory to his career. I opened the book to the final pages. I didn't read them to her. I forced her to look at the handwriting, the frantic, ink-stained cries of her own mother. He broke her, I said. He turned her into a ghost and kept her in this house for 40 years. And you watched it happen. You were a child, yes, but you grew up. You saw the sadness. You saw the protocol. And you decided to do it too. You married a man just like Robert. You built a house just like this one. You kept the lie breathing. This is the part of the interrogation where the suspect finally breaks. Not with a shout, but with a confession that changes the scope of the entire crime. My mother didn't argue. She didn't defend Robert. She just started to cry. Not the polite crying of an Aldridge woman, but a ragged, ugly sound that seemed to come from her marrow. I didn't just watch it happen, Maya, she choked out. I was the reason he found out. The room went silent. The heartbeat thud of the music returned, louder now. I was 8 years old, she continued, her eyes fixed on a page from August 65. I saw her. I saw them in the garden. I saw the way she looked at Clara, a look she never gave my father. I was a child. I was scared. I told him. I told my father that Mommy had a friend who made her smile too much. The true crime wasn't just Grandpa Robert's ultimatum. It was the way the perfect image was enforced by everyone, even the victims. My mother had been the whistleblower for a crime of the heart. She had spent the last 50 years trying to atone for that one moment of childhood honesty by being the most perfect version of what her father demanded. She was an accomplice, yes, but she was also the first casualty. He didn't just settle it with Clara, Mom whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain hitting the windows. He paid her to leave the country. He told her if she ever contacted Eleanor again, he'd use his influence at the firm to ensure she was institutionalized. And Eleanor, he told her that if she left, he would make sure she never saw me again. He told her I would grow up believing she was a fallen woman. He used me as the bars for her cage. I looked at my mother, this woman I had envied and resented for her poise, and I realized she was just a prisoner who had learned to love her chains. She had spent her life polishing the silver, because if she stopped, she'd have to remember the sound of Clara's car driving away. She'd have to remember the day her mother's eyes went dark. The perfect image was shattered. Not just Grandma Eleanor's, but the entire Aldridge bloodline. "What are you going to do?" Mom asked, looking at the diary. There was a desperate plea in her eyes. The fear of the Oak Haven whispers was still there, buried deep. If people find out, the firm, your father's reputation, the foundation. I looked at the burgundy book. I thought about Clara. I thought about the cerulean blue paint that was never allowed to dry. The foundation is rotten, Mom, I said, and I'm not going to live in a house that's falling down. I'm going to tell the truth. All of it. In Act 3, the consequences of a shattered image finally come home to roost. Because when you tell a town like Oak Haven that their idols have clay feet, they don't just get angry, they get dangerous. It was time to move the evidence from the kitchen table to the front page. There is a specific kind of silence that exists in a house built on a lie. It's heavy, it's thick, it feels like the air before a lightning strike. After I left my mother's house that night, I didn't go back to my apartment. I drove to a 24-hour diner, sat in a corner booth, much like the ones Eleanor and Clara must have frequented, and I began to type. I wasn't just writing an essay, I was performing an exorcism. I titled it, The Architecture of a Lie. How the Oak Haven gold standard was built on a grave. I didn't hold back. I detailed the false bottom in the trunk. I quoted the entries about the cerulean blue paint. I described the September Protocol of 1965, the legal and social assassination of a woman's identity. I named names. I talked about my grandfather, the judge, and my father, the lawyer, and in how they had curated a family like a museum exhibit, where the only thing on display was the vanity of men who were afraid of the truth. I hit send at 4:13 a.m. In a town like Oakhaven, news doesn't just travel, it infects. By noon the next day, the essay had been shared 3,000 times. By the following morning, it was on the front page of the Gazette, the same paper that had spent 60 years polishing our medals. The immediate consequence wasn't a sense of relief, it was a war. My father, Robert Jr., didn't call me. He sent a formal letter from the firm. It was printed on the same thick, cream-colored cardstock I'd grown up seeing on the dining table. It didn't say, "I love you," or "Why did you do this?" It spoke of libel, reputational damage, and legal repercussions. It was the same tool his father had used on Clara. The law wasn't a search for justice for the Aldridge men. It was a weapon used to maintain the hedge height. The Oakhaven freeze set in. When I went to the local coffee shop, the baristas, people I'd known since kindergarten, looked at their shoes. My Aunt Carol left a voicemail that was mostly just sobbing and screams of, "How could you do this to your grandmother's memory?" But then, the cracks began to appear in other houses too. This is the part the perfect image gatekeepers don't want you to know. The truth is contagious. I started getting emails, not from lawyers, but from people in town. A woman 2 blocks over confessed that her perfect marriage ended 10 years ago, but she lived in the same house as her ex-husband to keep up appearances for the PTA. A former clerk at the law firm reached out to tell me he'd seen the files, the hush money accounts that had been active for decades. The Aldridge legacy wasn't just my family's cage, it was the blueprint for the entire town's imprisonment. By shattering our image, I had accidentally handed everyone else a hammer. The most profound consequence, however, happened within the 4 walls of the gilded cage. A month after the essay went viral, my mother did something an Aldridge woman had never done. She quit. She resigned from the school board. She stopped attending the charity galas, and most shockingly, she told my father she was leaving. I went to help her pack. The house didn't smell like lemon oil anymore. It smelled like oil paint and old books. Mom was in the kitchen, but she wasn't polishing the silver. She was throwing it into a box for goodwill. "I spent my whole life being a curator for a museum no one wanted to visit," she told me. She looked tired, but for the first time in my life, she looked real. She had started painting again. Not the proper landscapes my grandfather would have approved of, but abstract, violent splashes of cerulean blue. We had a dinner that night. It wasn't at the dining table with the lace cloth. We sat on the floor of the empty living room, eating pizza out of a cardboard box. We talked about the diary. We talked about Clara. For the first time, we weren't performing. We were just 2 women sitting in the ruins of a lie, breathing the fresh air for the first time. I eventually found Clara, or what was left of her. She had moved to a small town in Vermont after the settlement. She never married. She never became a world-famous artist. She lived a quiet, solitary life, teaching art to children and painting the mountains. She died 5 years ago. I traveled there last month. I stood at her grave and I laid the burgundy diary on the grass. I told her that Eleanor had never forgotten. I told her that the cage was finally open. People ask me if I regret it. They look at my father's ruined reputation, the "for sale" sign on the family estate, and the fractured relationships, and they ask, was it worth it? Just for a diary? My answer is always the same. Grandma Eleanor lived 60 years as a ghost so that we could live as a brand. I chose to kill the brand so that she could finally be a human being again. The Aldridge gold standard is dead. And thank God for that, because perfection isn't a goal, it's a sentence. It's a wall we build to keep the world from seeing who we really are. But once that wall comes down, you realize something beautiful. You don't need a white picket fence when you finally have the truth. Some locks are meant to be broken. I'm just glad I was the one holding the key. The winter that followed the exposure was the quietest of my life. In the true crime world, we talk about the trial of the century, but we rarely talk about the silence of the aftermath. When the headlines fade and the viral threads stop trending, you're left with the quiet reality of a world that has been rearranged. My family wasn't just a news story anymore. We were a ghost story. The Aldridge estate sat empty, a for sale sign buried under a snowdrift. My father had moved into a sterile corporate apartment in the city, still fighting a losing battle against the firm's partners, who were stripping him of his equity. The Aldridge name had become a liability, a toxic asset. But while the men were fighting over the ledger, I was busy with the archive. I hadn't stopped digging, because once you find one false bottom in a trunk, you start to realize the whole world might have a double floor. I became obsessed with the September Protocol. I wanted to know if my grandfather, Judge Robert Aldridge Sr., had done this to anyone else. I spent months in the basement of the county courthouse, sifting through the discrete settlements and privacy agreements from the 1960s. And that's when the story shifted from a family drama to a systemic investigation. I found them. 6 other names. 6 other women who had voluntarily entered psychiatric care or moved away suddenly in the mid-60s, all with legal paperwork signed by my grandfather's firm. It wasn't just an affair he was covering up. It was a factory of silence. He had built a career on being the cleaner for Oak Haven's elite. He was the man you called when the perfect image was threatened by the truth of a human heart. The crime was much larger than I ever imagined. My grandmother Eleanor wasn't just a victim, she was a witness to a machine. And that diary? It was the only piece of testimony that had survived the shredder. In February, I received a letter. Not a legal threat, but a handwritten note on heavy, textured paper. It was from Sarah, Clara's niece. She had seen my essay. She had seen the cerulean blue paint I described. My aunt never stopped painting those rivers, Sarah told me as we sat in her kitchen. She pulled out a wooden crate from beneath the table. Inside were dozens of letters. Letters Eleanor had sent to a P.O. box in Vermont for 30 years. Eleanor hadn't just stayed in the cage. She had been tunneling out, one letter at a time. Dearest Clara, one letter from 1982 read, Robert is hosting another gala tonight. I'm wearing the pearls. I'm smiling. But in my mind, I'm on that river with you. I'm still wearing the blue smock. They can keep my body here, but they never got the rest of me. Sarah and I spent the weekend piecing together the alternate history of the Aldridges. For every perfect event my father bragged about, there was a corresponding letter of defiance. For every award my mother won, there was a secret message of hope sent to Vermont. Grandma Eleanor hadn't just survived the cage, she had sabotaged it. She had raised my mother to value poise as a survival tactic, hoping that one day, one of us would be strong enough to use that poise to burn the whole thing down. I was the one who held the match. But she was the one who had soaked the walls in kerosene. The final consequence of the diary wasn't the lawsuits or the scandals. It was the meeting. Last month, I drove my mother to Vermont. I watched her sit across from Sarah. I watched her hold the letters her mother had written in secret while she was just a child in the next room. I watched my mother realize that her mother hadn't been distant or melancholy. She had been a revolutionary in a pearl necklace. I thought I was protecting her by being perfect, Mom said, her voice steady for the first time in months. But all I was doing was helping the warden. The true crime of the Aldridge family didn't end with a conviction in a courtroom. It ended with a reconciliation in a kitchen. We gave Sarah the burgundy diary, and she gave us the letters. The two halves of a broken life were finally put back together. As I film this, the Aldridge estate has finally been sold. It's being turned into a community arts center. My mother is one of the founding board members. My father, we don't talk much, but I hear he's still trying to find a way to sue the unnamed sources in my essay. He's still looking for a lock for a door that's already been kicked off its hinges. People in the true crime niche always ask for a resolution. They want to know if justice was served. Justice didn't come in the form of a prison sentence. Justice came in the form of my mother's first gallery show. Justice came in the form of Sarah and I visiting that grave in Vermont and planting a garden that doesn't need to be perfect. The gold standard is gone. The gold was just brass. And the standard was just a cage. I used to be afraid of the neighbors talking. Now I hope they never stop. Because every time we tell the truth about what's happening behind the white picket fences, the fences get a little shorter. The walls get a little thinner. My name is Maya Aldridge. I shattered my family's perfect image. And in the wreckage, I finally found a home. The case is closed. But the life is just beginning.
If you watched this story to the end and you enjoyed it, give us a like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. My name is Mr. Mike, and I write and produce fictional stories like this to entertain you. Every story will be read in the voice of the gender that tells it. See you next time.